Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. In this session, we're going to find out about the OU Library, an amazing resource with the most fab team of librarians who offer you a whole range of support and services and resources to assist you in your studies. So I'm joined by Wendy and Uta from the library. Hello. Thank you for coming along.
You're welcome.
And students always like hearing about the library, in particular your referencing workshops that you do, which are great. And I think you're going to participate in some of those with us as well at Student Hub Live from our workshops. We've asked people at home what they expect from an online library, so please fill that in. Our Wordles need 3 things or they just won't work. So if you can only think of 1 or 2, that's fine. Just put a full stop in and then your results will submit. So what do you expect from an online library? You might not know the answer to that. It might be cake or something. They don't do that. But the other question is, why should you reference? So we've got 3 things there. Not a trick question, but people have expressed anxieties about referencing as well. But let's start with the online library, because there's a physical library we'll show people. Yep. But most study, as we know, will be done at students' homes. They're going to be using the online library. So what is that?
Well, we've got a fantastic library here at the Open University in Milton Keynes. You have access to a wealth of resources, but not only access to the resources, there's help and support, there's guidance and training events which students can access. So let's start first of all with an overview about the library resources which are available to students. So one of my favourites are the reference sources. That's the Oxford English Dictionary, encyclopedias and dictionaries. And many of these are subject-specific dictionaries which you can access in collections such as Oxford Reference. So these are really useful when you come across a new topic, a new idea, and you just want a little bit of background information to get yourself started. So really good resource.
Particularly if you're new to a subject area and all of a sudden they use like words that you might meet in every day with a different meaning.
That's right, and then you might have a subject-specific dictionary, so you might go to, for example, Dictionary of Economics, Dictionary of Geography, which will give a slightly different definition on, say, example, inequality or equality. So they can be very useful.
Okay.
And
you've got ebooks as well.
Yes,
which are brilliant because books are so expensive now. But ebooks are great because you can just get the chapters and not read the whole thing.
That's right. Yes. So you can do a search, and we have well over 400,000 ebooks now, and it's grown and collection's grown enormously just over the last few years. So easily accessible.
What's in those ebooks?
Some of them are very readable. So you may see, for example, have an introduction to globalisation, books about climate change, global warming, different subject areas, history, science, English literature, and students may be directed to read a particular chapter by a module, or they may do some of their own independent research, and they'll search and find some information in a book. So very, very accessible, and they can be read online or downloaded. Parts of them can be downloaded.
Some of them are great, like some of the research methods books and things. Like, you know, often you end up buying things like that, which are very expensive. But to know about a particular method or something that may not warrant purchasing a whole book, it's nice to be able to go and...
So you can just dip into a chapter, and some of them are very readable, and some of them are more suitable for third level or postgraduate students. A whole range of ebooks.
Perfect. So now, the journals are the other key area, aren't they?
Yes, we have thousands of journals. So
tell me what a journal is, because that's one example of a definition of a term that means something very different to people who may not be in academic context.
So journals are periodicals. They're published regularly, perhaps monthly or quarterly, and they're usually on an academic topic. So, for example, you may have heard of The Lancet or Nature. Those are ones which are quite popular. So they have academic articles, so they're usually very useful for your assignment. The students tend to be introduced to them at level 1 and will be using them more at level 2 and level 3. And they will be introduced to them by their modules. There will be some key journals in particular areas, for example, Journal of British Criminology, and the students will become familiar with those journals over time.
Brilliant. Now, you've also got newspapers.
Yes.
What's the point in all that, then?
Well, we have the historical newspapers, which are great for our history students. So, for example, we have newspapers from the 19th centuries for good primary sources, so they can read about what happened at the time. And then we have archives such as Nexus UK, Gale's InfoTrack, and they give access to contemporary newspapers or newspapers of the last 10, 20 years, national, international, regional newspapers. So these are quite popular in science and in social science, and they can give information about current perspectives and attitudes on a particular subject. So it's really useful to search for information on a topic.
Okay, and you've also got databases which house the journals, don't
That's
they?
right,
So what's
yeah.
a database when it's at home in the library?
Well, the databases are collections of material that you can search across to find information on a topic. So they can include journals, they can include ebooks, book chapters, images, music, sound, a whole range of material can be found in different journals. And as I said, they're useful for searching for information on a topic. And we do have over 500 in the different subject areas in the library. So
Gosh,
quite a wealth.
You've got so much stuff in there. I think if people aren't feeling overwhelmed already, they might be now.
Yes.
But
yes.
it's really important to note that while there is just so much choice there and so many things that may feel unfamiliar, the other important part of things you do, apart from dusting all these journals, is skilling students in the important ways of finding the information, and that all happens in a really gentle way. So from level 1, they don't need to go and do all of this right now.
No.
You design activities and work with the module team so that they learn the right things at the right time. So what would you say to our level 1 students then, who might be thinking, oh gosh, this all sounds great, but
it might sound quite daunting. Yeah. Well, the first thing to be aware of is I've described a lot of resources, and you may be thinking, where do I start? A good place to start is selected resources for your study. So go to library resources, selected resources for your study, and the resources within the library are grouped into different subject areas. So if you're not sure where to start, go to selected resources for your study. You'll find, for example, history, social sciences, and then you can browse down to, for example, criminology, and you will find the key databases, key journals, and the key ebooks. So a really good place to start. And you can see that on the screen there, the different areas, and you just click on your link, whether it's music, English, and you will find those key databases. Not all the resources relevant, but it's a good place to get started.
Brilliant. And you filter those for various different subject areas.
Yes, yeah. Just click and browse down.
Perfect. Now, the other important way that people commonly search is using library search. So tell us about that.
Well, library search is a great tool. You can find it on the library homepage, really easy to find, and it searches across many of the library's databases. Not all of the databases. It excludes, for example, law and some of the newspaper archives. So instead of going to the individual databases and you want some information on a topic, just enter your search term and you will find lots of results. And it's a really good tool if you're looking for a specific ebook. If you have the title of an ebook or the title of a journal article, just type the title in, and hopefully it will pop up in your results, and just click on the link and you can access it.
Okay, brilliant. So we've looked at all those various things, and students access all of this from the library tab. So from Student Home, they can go to the library using that tab, and they can either get the resources for their study or use library search, and then they can access this wealth of ebooks, journals, databases, etc. So that's all absolutely brilliant. But the other thing that you do, apart from providing these resources, is help students to evaluate information and know what's good to use, because whilst there can be lots, it may or may not be relevant. So Uta, can you give us an example of how you work with students to sort of help them, I guess, evaluate the usefulness of some of this information?
Yeah, completely. I mean, we've got here, put something along, which is put it on my knees, the WWW framework. So our resources are already quality assessed. However, there are these frameworks which help students to pick even more high quality resources. So this is basically a very simple framework for picking the right web resources. So if students find something on the internet, and quite often they do so, particularly on the first level, they want to know whether the website they are picking is actually high quality. So what I start with is who is it actually who has written the website, who owns it, then also why was it written? Is there a particular agenda? Is it to actually convince or, persuade people into buying things? And then also, when was it last updated? If we're looking at a website which hasn't been updated for potentially years, you might want to consider not using it. So this is quite good if you are looking for at particular websites, also organizational websites. There is another framework which I'm holding up now, which is the so-called prompt framework. Again, the letters stand for something. So prompt stands for the first P.
Now you can't look, Uta.
I'm just trying to remember exactly. No. It's
remember.
the first one is provenance. In fact, this framework will have a massive overlap to the other one because it's basically similar things you have to look out for. You always have to think of who is actually the author of something, who has produced it. So provenance is kind of the same as the whom in the other one.
The presentation here is the first one, which I think is really important when, particularly, some of these things are so long, and it's really helpful to know, like in terms of the presentation, look at the abstract and then sort of see what's in it instead of starting to read about all the stuff that was happening before you even looked at it. So that can be a really helpful tool.
Exactly. So that's like the other P, the presentation. Exactly. So it's very much, is it logical? Is it structured in particular sections, easy to follow? It's quite important, particularly for articles, because the prompt framework is mainly used and applied to research articles, to academic research. So this is why it's important. Then, of course, there is the R for relevance. Whatever you pick has to be relevant to your topic. If it is not really directly relevant, don't pick it for your assignment. You can always use it as further reading or in your bibliography if it's tangentially relevant. Then there is objectivity. Again, why has someone chosen it? Is it just to inform, and is it objective, or has it got bias? You don't really want bias. The method is quite specific to journal articles and academic literature. You want to know what is the evidence presented and how has it been done? I've mentioned both provenance and presentation for the P's, and the T, again, that's timeliness, which is equivalent to the when of the WWW framework. And it depends. Very often it is important that it's timely, that it's current information, but it depends on the topic. Sometimes you might have to do historical search. And if it's a historical topic you're writing about, yes, of course, you do go back further. But if you have something like, for example, I support the nursing teams quite a lot, and you want to know the latest in nursing interventions, you don't want to choose something from the 1970s or so. So that's what we're using, and you can find these also on the library website under help and support, and there is an extra link which actually goes to this. So students can always have a look and get help.
Sometimes for their assignments they might meet one of these, and they might work through an activity which requires them to find an article and then evaluate it like this. More commonly at level 2, I would say, isn't it? But even so, library services are built into the curriculum so that students get familiar with stuff as they, right from the start.
Exactly. And they have to actually get into the why am I doing certain things, being critical about sources, why they're choosing certain resources, why they're saying certain things from the beginning.
Okay. So we have 2 widgets at the minute. I would like to look at our multi-choice question, which is about why you should reference. We've only got 3 choices: to acknowledge your source, to show you've read the material, or it's just something that you should do. So let's see what you said about referencing. 94% said to acknowledge the sources, and 6% said it's just something you should do. I mean, it wasn't a hard question, to be fair.
I think they're both correct, isn't it?
Well, or else.
The way I think about referencing, I like to think about when you reference, why you reference, and how you reference.
Like a framework,
So when, if you use someone else's ideas or words, and why do you reference, you should acknowledge someone else's work, credit someone else's ideas. And the other, I think the important thing to remember is if you're writing an essay, doing your assignment, and if you make a point and you support it with evidence from someone else's work, if you signpost clearly where that evidence came from, that is good academic practice and it lends strength to your work. So it's beneficial to a student as well as being it's something you should do to avoid accidental plagiarism, is also beneficial to you. And you also need to reference so your tutor, provide that reference so your tutor can, or any reader, is particularly interesting essay, may want to follow up that source and find out more information about it.
And I think because for level 1 in particular, unless you're told otherwise, you're given everything you need to get 100%. So you don't need to go and do anything unless you're told to.
But you still need to reference your module material.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And some students can find this confusing because they're like, well, you've given me a question, Open University, you've given me a book, why do you need to know I've read? Of course I've read the book, you know. You've asked me what to write about. So can you explain then how important it is to reference in those contexts when you are using the module materials?
Well, one thing you do, you provide an in-text reference, and so to say which part of the module material you're using, and that'd be quite difficult for
Well, it could be
a
a
tutor.
video, a book, or anything,
So, which source you use and where you found it. So it's so someone else could follow up. And also, it's good practice for future when you are referencing other types of sources, just to get into the habit of referencing the material you're using. And some students get slightly worried about referencing. You said at level 1, it's fairly straightforward, and examples will be provided of how to reference. So you should find an example, either be pointed to a style guide or find examples of how to reference that video, that module chapter, etc. So it should be fairly straightforward.
On Access, we always say, you know, have a go. It's about acknowledging that you've tried to sort of say, I found this from here. The commas and things don't matter so much. It's about sort of really identifying this is from the book, this is from the video. And also, I think more importantly, to sort of contextualise what you're saying, you know, very broad statements then just with the module. It doesn't really support that. It's about thinking about exactly what you're saying to emphasise the point and what evidence you're using specifically. So-and-so said this or so-and-so wrote this. That's a good thing to reference, and that's when you might need to put that in-text citation in.
And I think the important thing to remember is, can someone else find this information from the information that you provide?
Sometimes students get a bit hung up about a punctuation and whether it's a comma or full stop. And as you said, especially on level 1, that's not really what it's about.
And the other thing I think worth emphasising, we've been talking a bit about feedback from assignments, and this is slightly less relevant to you, but a point I think worth reassuring the students at home about is that when I'm marking my students' work, for example, I might pick up on some of the referencing just to help them, you know, along the way with that. But I might make 6 comments about the referencing and maybe about other comments about things, but they can think the referencing is a big problem because I've picked up on a few things, but I'm only trying to do that to show them something. So it's very important to realise, I guess, when something's a big problem and when the feedback is there to help you improve on those things as well. HJ, how's everyone at home?
We're doing really well. There's Anne actually went to all the online sessions with the library, and she said she's found them super helpful and recommends that anyone else goes to them. I've been to them myself, and I really found it useful for referencing. Hayley's got a great question. She's a bit unsure about what is deemed as common knowledge or something I have just learned. So is there any advice we can get for discerning that?
The example I think of common knowledge is what you would expect a lot of people to know. It's not found in any particular book. I think that, of example, Usain Bolt holds the world record for 100 metres. Well, most people know that, and you couldn't refer it to a particular newspaper article or so. That's what common knowledge. Another example is perhaps the dates of the Second World War. And there's also common knowledge within subjects. So if you've been studying psychology for 3 years, you might think this is common knowledge. Most people studying at this level would know that. But if in doubt, I would say reference.
Can I just come in on that too? I think, for example, some of our nursing students, because they're nursing, it's common knowledge to them what a lot of these things are around illnesses or measurements, blood pressure and things like that. But it is not actually common knowledge more broadly than that. So I would say ask your tutor if you're not sure about a subject-specific piece of information being common knowledge or not. But,
Are you getting more tea?
I'm hopeful that I might just get... Thank you. You're so good to me.
Works so well.
I know. Everyone needs a tea bell.
It's lovely.
You should come back here with me. I want some more tea. We can have some cakes though, ladies. So we're nearly out of time, but I'd like to show some screenshots, Uta, about how students get help and find the OU library, just so we can sort of show them some of the slides and things as well.
Course.
So how students get started with the OU library and where they find guidance and how they can connect to it. So let's take a look at how it looks on the website.
Okay, yes, so this is our help and support website, and they find quite a lot of different help and support mechanisms there. First of all, there are links, for example, getting started with the online library. I would highly recommend, because these are introductions to the different kinds of resources like ebooks, journals, databases, and they really explain from scratch, particularly when you're a first-year student, you have never studied before, what they actually are and what they do. And then you've also got finding resources for my assignment, and that goes through how to do a literature search, which of course is how to appropriately access all these lovely resources which Wendy has spoken about. And then, you know, you can do the evaluating and picking the right resources, but you need to do a proper search first.
And they can also get information about joining Sconnell and the library
Yes,
help desk, can't they?
absolutely.
We've mentioned Sconnell a bit earlier.
Yes, yeah. So Sconnell actually is a scheme where students can access other university libraries. Most university libraries in the UK are part of the scheme, and the link is also on the help and support websites. There are instructions how to sign up, and students can just use these spaces, but they can also borrow some books there, which is great.
And the web chat, the 24-hour web chat is
Yes.
great, isn't it? So if
Yeah.
students have queries, they can text.
Yeah, I mean, students love this. Hopefully they will continue loving it. So yeah, there is 24/7 help available, and the links are on every page on the library website. So you can chat with one of us librarians at any time. And it can be anything information related, you know, finding something appropriate or resource which you can't make work, referencing. And we are there and help you.
Brilliant. Okay, there's also the Being Digital resources, which are fab. Those are sort of like 5 to 10 minute chunks of training students can do.
Yeah. Particularly, again, when students are just starting now, I would recommend them, especially when you're a little bit concerned about your information skills, you've never done much searching, maybe not even that much on the internet on a very limited way. Have a look, there is a lot. There is something about a digital footprint as well. It's not just all referencing and finding information. And you can just fit it into your, you know, between the afternoon and the morning or so in your lunch break. And it's quite easy to do, and you can do it step by step, and it just makes you feel a bit more confident, hopefully.
Fab. Okay. Now, brief plug about the training and events, because Anna mentioned before how useful they are. So where do students find out about those? Let's see if we can play that.
Oh yes, we have got here our training and events page, also on the library website. So that's one of the tabs.
Yeah.
And we run a training programs throughout the year. And the links which you can see here are the links to the different types of sessions.
Okay.
And further below, which is not in the screenshot, you can see the dates and the times when the next few sessions are being held. There are several ones for this week as well.
Brilliant. Let's see if we can see some of those.
So, for example, there is an introduction to library services. So that's great because you get a bit of a tour, more so even than what we've described now, and how you actually find your way amongst these resources and links. And then there is something on referencing, another session on library search, databases, evaluating information. So we're covering all this in these different sessions, and they're between 30 and 60 minutes long, most of them 30 or 45 minutes.
Brilliant. Okay, so people can find out about those training and events on the training and events tab, and then it'll have a detailed list of those.
Yes.
Wendy, can I just end by asking about the additional support for disabled students?
Yeah, we want to make our resources available to everyone. So, for example, core resources in modules, if students are directed to library resources, most of the library material can be read aloud by screen readers. So if students are visually impaired, have a screen reader, they should be able to listen to them. If for any reason they're not, we will convert them to an accessible format. And there is some support on the library website. So if you go to Help and Support, and there's a special tab for disabled user support, and there's a particular scheme called Census Access. Students can access it and they can use it to convert material which they don't find accessible to perhaps an audio, so they can listen to it rather than reading it. And there are Uta mentioned the training sessions. We do offer one which is particularly to give tips to people who perhaps have some difficulty navigating the library website, to give them those additional tips to help them round. So do visit the help and support page and
You've also
look at the
got
material.
census access, haven't you?
Yes, I mentioned that. That's a scheme which students can go to it if, for example, have a difficulty reading print. They can use that scheme and simply convert the material to perhaps an
do that?
audio.
Because some people like to listen to things instead, and they might not have a disability.
I'm not sure if it's open to all. I think you do have to have that disability, but if you go to the website, you'll find the details.
Brilliant. And there are other tools as well that I've heard many students use to convert documents into audio files. But that's been a wonderful introduction to the packed options students have got for library services. So Uta and Wendy, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoyed that session, and go and sign up for some of the library training events, and also we've got Student Hub Live events as well. Carleen, a big shout out to you. She survived so long without a cup of tea, so I think she's going to go down to the coffee shop, isn't she, when her battery runs out, HJ?
Yeah, that's right.
I know, she's got all her laptop charged and her mobile phone charged, so she's all set up for the rest of the day.
She's going to be a great student. There's no doubt she'll succeed.
We'll be keeping her company throughout.
She's ready to go.
But Ingrid said as well that I worked for 14 years for an electricity company, and there was 45 people on the Scottish island that lost power for 5 days. But when he turned up to fix everything, they were just enjoying themselves in the pub, weren't they?
The joys of power cuts. We had one the other night as well, but yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad you're still with us, Carleen. That's been absolutely fantastic. Do you know, somebody else who sent us something is Anne, who I think is in the chat at the moment, who's one of our Student Hub Live ambassadors. So, you know, Student Hub Live, it's a thing that not everyone knows about at the Open University, but we're open to everybody. So if you've liked our programmes, go and tell other people about them. Come along tomorrow. Tell other people to come along tomorrow also. But Anne is one of our ambassadors, and she's given us a really lovely video about how she's found our workshops. And so you can see what she says about them and a little bit about what they're like as well in our next break. And then we'll be back for more discussions about the OU careers and employability services. So I'll see you very soon for that.